Welcome back to a new research video. Been a long time, haven't recorded a video in a while, but here we are, keeping cozy next to the fireplace. Anyway, magnetism. You saw with the introduction before this, and a very unique topic because most people would think that magnetism, we already 100% know what it is. You know, it's like already taught everywhere in schools. There's no debate about it. Well, that's why it's such an interesting video to make, because it's a topic that no one wouldn't ever have expected. So turns out there's a lot of grey area in this, and what we've been taught is completely wrong. And the information we're getting is from someone named Kenneth Wheeler. He has a YouTube channel, and we started watching him a few months ago, and like around a month ago, we started watching him more in depth and watching him more often. And we decided we'd do a video, so we've been researching for around 4 days, 3 or 4 days, just watching his videos, taking notes, trying to understand what he's saying. And at first it's very difficult to understand, especially since we haven't really done anything close to this level of difficulty in terms of like how long it would take to understand it properly. So we're not going to be able to fully understand this topic and be able to talk about it to the best of our abilities. We're going to try to explain what we learned. We're going to be talking about basically what we currently think magnetism is, and then the theory that's saying that's wrong, this is what it is. We're going to be showing geometry of the magnetic field. We're going to be talking to you what magnets are. We're going to be defining magnetism and connecting it all, because magnetism, according to this man, is more than just magnetism, because they would have you believe that magnetic field, gravitational field, electric field, these are all the same things according to this man. So it's a very interesting topic. We're going to be talking about it now, and yep, stick around, it'll get interesting. Alrighty, we're back here. It's probably just after the introduction, but now what I'm going to do, I'm just going to give you guys a brief summary of the field theory and the whole idea of it. And then after this, Sean should be talking about just what the current view of the field theory is, the wrong view, or just what they're saying magnetism is. So anyway, let's begin of what this theory is. So what this theory is trying to say is that magnetism is more than just magnetic field or like a magnetic force. A magnet has more than just a magnetic force, or magnetism in general. He's saying that magnetism is what gives life to everything in the universe. Magnetism. And I'm not sure if we've talked about this yet, but magnetism, electricity, and gravity are all the same phenomenon, pretty much. Well, not phenomenon, but he likes to say that gravity doesn't exist. Well, obviously gravity, something falling down, something's happening there, so that exists, but it's not a separate force. It's not, the Earth has a gravitational pull, it has a magnetic field, it has all these things. They're all one of the same thing, but for some reason, we are taught that it's all different things. We've been taught incorrectly, and this could be because they don't want to teach us the right thing, or they're just too stupid to understand it. And he makes it seem in all his videos that it's so simple to understand, and he doesn't really understand why everyone can't understand it or keeps teaching the same wrong teachings. So what he's saying, basically, to understand this magnetism, you must understand counter space, or the ether, or the dielectric. He's saying magnetism is the dielectric field. the ether, pretty much, in simple terms. So it's a very difficult topic to understand, and most people wouldn't understand it because, like you said, you must understand counter space. And the best way to show this is through the geometry of it. So yeah, the geometry of it, and this is the conjugate geometry of everything in the universe. And I'll probably show something on the screen for you guys now. And there's a name for this geometry and this shape. It's called a toroidal shape. So it's the donut shape, and this also looks similar to a black hole. Well, it's not. And see that black thing in the middle? That is the dielectric pathway to the plane of inertia. Which plane of inertia here, I'll show a thing on the screen. It's the thing that lies in the middle, the lowest amount of pressure mediation in the field, and this is where all life happens. And that's why he's basically saying that this gives life to everything in the universe. And life is in the plane of inertia. And this is in the center, and in the center of that is like a point that is basically in the dielectric, in the counter space. It's quite difficult to understand, and honestly, I may be saying something wrong, but I'm sort of understanding of it where I can sort of break down what, like say for the geometry of it, I can break down where it is, but he'll explain it better. So now that's just a brief summary. I may have talked too much, but yeah, if this is true, you know, it's literally the nature of the universe and everything like that. But obviously it's not like 100% thing. That's why it's such an interesting topic to learn about and find out about it. And I'm going to be showing you now, probably after Sean talks a bit, some of his videos and how he talks about it, because he can also explain it more deeply of exactly what's going on in the magnetic field. Now, me and Sean have been researching this for a couple of days, so we do understand it, but to actually put it together in a video, it's much harder for me to explain it, which is the purpose of these videos, but I'm going to have to use some of his footage to explain it better. So yeah, hopefully you enjoy this video. This is going to be a longer video as usual with these research task videos. Next week we're more likely going to be doing something more outdoors or less just sitting on the computer all day. Anyway, I'm going to stop yapping on. Now I'm going to bring it over to Sean, and he's going to explain to you the current view, the incorrect view of magnetism and the universe. Okay everybody, so we have now talked to you just a little bit about the field theory and how it works and the basic mechanics of it. Now we're going to talk about the current mainstream view on magnetism and what the main consensus for what everyone thinks magnetism is. So firstly, I just want to say, they say that there's a magnetic field, a gravitational field, and an electric field. And basically this guy, Kenneth Wheeler, he's saying that gravity, electricity, and magnetism are all the same thing.
Hello everybody, this is me, Sean. I'm currently editing and I've realized that we have lost some footage. So I'm just going to repeat what I would have said right now on the current view on magnetic fields. So just to start, I'd like to say that a magnet is surrounded by its magnetic field. It has a magnetic field surrounding it. And the Earth also has its magnetic field. And now I'm just going to tell you how the Earth's magnetic field is formed and what a magnetic field is, basically. See ya.
There is, I think, molten iron in the Earth, in the center of the Earth, somewhere there, and basically it's getting an electric charge, and an electric current going through it, which is basically magnetizing it, and that electric current is creating a magnetic field, of which that makes things have that magnetic attraction. So the current view is that there's a magnetic attraction between these two magnets, and an electric current in the center of the Earth is charging molten iron, and that's the Earth's magnetic field. Modern day science says that there is a gravitational field in the Earth,
and there is a electric field, there's a magnetic field. They're saying all of these are different fields. Basically, with the field theory, they're saying it's all the same thing, just with different properties, which we'll get into later. Since I obviously don't know everything, in fact I don't even know that much about this, I'd like to show you a video of Richard Feynman, a top scientist of magnetism, a very well-known name across the science community. And this is a video of a news reporter asking him about magnetism in very simple, and the news reporter just was talking very broadly in case someone completely doesn't know anything about magnetism. He was saying what is that stuff, what is that, just with no specific term, what is that between the magnets? And I just want to show you how Richard Feynman, a top scientist on magnetism, replies.
If you get hold of two magnets and you push them, you can feel this pushing between them. Turn it around the other way and they slam together. Now, what is it, the feeling between those two magnets?
What do you mean, what's the feeling between the two magnets?
There's something there, isn't there? I mean, the sensation is that there's something there when you push these two magnets together.
Listen to my question. What is the meaning when you say that there's a feeling? Of course you feel it. Now, what do you want to know?
What I want to know is what's going on between these two bits of metal.
Magnets repel each other.
And well, then what does that mean, or why are they doing that, or how are they doing it?
You're asking.
I must say, I think that's a perfectly reasonable question.
Of course, it's a reason. It's an excellent question. Okay. But the problem that you're asking, you see, when you ask why something happens, how does a person answer why something happens? For example, Aunt Minnie is in a hospital. Why? Because she went out and she slipped on the ice and broke her hip. That satisfies people. It satisfies, but it wouldn't satisfy someone who came from another planet, knew nothing about things. First, you understand why, when you break your hip, do you go to the hospital? How do you get to the hospital when the hip was broken? Well, because her husband, seeing that she had the hip was broken, called the hospital up and sent somebody to get her. All that is understood by people. Now, when you explain a why, you have to be in some framework that you allow something to be true. Otherwise, you're perpetually asking why. Why did the husband call up the hospital? Because husband is interested in his wife's welfare. Not always. Some husbands aren't interested in their wife's welfare when they're drunk and they're angry. And so you begin to get a very interesting understanding of the world and all its complications. In order if you try to follow anything up, you go deeper and deeper in various directions. For example, you could go, why did she slip on the ice? Well, ice is slippery. Everybody knows that, no problem. But you ask, why is ice slippery? That's kind of curious. Ice is extremely slippery. It's very interesting. You say, how does it work? You could either say, I'm satisfied that you've answered me, ice is slippery, that explains it. Or you could go on and say, why is ice slippery? And then you're involved with something, because there aren't many things as slippery as ice. It's very hard to get. Greasy stuff, but that's sort of wet and slimy. But a solid that's so slippery, because it is in the case of ice that when you stand on it, they say, momentarily the pressure melts the...
Basically, for 7.5 minutes, he rambles about nothing, almost like he's trying to avoid the question or doesn't know how to answer it.
So I'm not going to be able to give you an answer to why magnets attract each other, except to tell you that they do, and to tell you that that's one of the elements in the world of the different kinds of forces. There are electrical forces, magnetic forces, gravitational forces, and others, and those are some of the parts. If you were a student, you'd go I could go further. I could tell you that the magnetic forces are related to the electrical forces very intimately, that our relationship between the gravity forces and electrical forces remains unknown, and so on. But I really can't do a good job, any job, of explaining magnetic force in terms of something else that you're more familiar with, because I don't understand it in terms of anything else that you're more familiar with.
So, there you just saw a top scientist in magnetism, and he couldn't answer the question. They say if you can't explain something in somewhat simple terms, or explain it to someone like a child, you don't understand it and you can't explain it at all. Because if you can only understand it to a certain extent, like he said, I can't understand it to a point where I can explain it to you in the terms that you would understand it. So they don't really understand anything, in other words. If you don't really understand what I'm talking about and you need a more clear, maybe more scientific based explanation of the current view on magnetism, I will put up a video now for you. It's a very simple video in very, very simple terms. Like, this is for people in primary school could understand this. This guy's going to be trying to explain to you on the current view of magnetism and how it works.
Magnets have two poles, North Pole and South Pole. In this magnet, the poles are at the two ends of the magnet. But how do we know which one is the North Pole and which one is the South Pole? If this magnet is suspended freely using a string, then the pole that points towards the north direction is called the North Pole, and the pole that points towards the south direction is the South Pole. Now, magnets can be of different shapes. A magnet of this shape is called a bar magnet. This is a horseshoe magnet and this is a disc magnet. In a bar magnet, this is the North Pole and this is the South Pole. In a horseshoe magnet, this white dot at the end is the North Pole and the other end is the South Pole. And in a disc magnet, it's like a coin. So this end is the North Pole, and if you flip it, this end will be the South Pole of the magnet. Now let me ask you, can a magnet have a single pole? Can a monopole exist? That's right, a monopole cannot exist. A magnet must have two poles. For example, if you break a magnet into two parts, each part will have two poles, a North Pole and a South Pole. Now, as you may know, like poles repel each other. So if I bring another bar magnet like this, as you can see here, the North Pole of the two magnets are repelling each other. Similarly, the two South Poles will also repel each other. And unlike poles attract each other. As you can see, the North Pole of this magnet attracts the South Pole. Do you know what happens when this magnet attracts the iron nail? The magnet first induces opposite poles on the iron nail. So the South Pole of the magnet attracts the North Pole on the iron nail. That's how magnets attract objects, by inducing opposite polarity on the object. And so we say induction precedes attraction. Now let's talk about magnetic field. You may have heard about other fields such as gravitational field and electric field. Field is an area or region where an object experiences a force. For example, when I lift this clip to a height, as you can see, it falls down. This clip is pulled down by the Earth's gravitational force. So there's a gravitational field here that pulls the objects down. Similarly, a magnet has a magnetic field around it. So when we place this magnet near this clip, as you can see, it experiences a force and gets attracted towards the magnet. This means that the magnetic field is strong near the magnet and it becomes weak far away from the magnet. The strength of the magnetic field decreases as the distance from the magnet increases. A magnetic field can be visualized using magnetic field lines. The pattern of the magnetic field lines tell us the shape of the magnetic field. Now, how can we find the shape of the magnetic field? There are two ways, using iron filings and a magnetic compass. First, let's discuss the iron filings method. Now, let's say you have a bar magnet like this. Now place a thick paper over the bar magnet and sprinkle a thin layer of iron filings over the paper, and then tap the paper gently. The iron filings arrange themselves in a regular pattern that looks something like this. This pattern gives us a rough idea of the shape of the magnetic field of this bar magnet. Now the other method is to use a magnetic compass to plot the magnetic field lines. Do you know how a magnetic compass is made? The magnetic needle in the compass is made using a tiny magnet, and it is pivoted so that it can move freely. This red part of the magnetic needle is the north pole, and it points towards the north direction. And this end is the south pole, and it points towards the south direction. Even if we shake or move this magnetic compass, the magnetic needle automatically aligns itself to point in the north-south direction. Do you know why? That's right, because the Earth has a magnetic field, and so this magnetic needle is aligning itself along the Earth's magnetic field. We'll talk more about the Earth's magnetic field later in the video. Now let's talk about the Earth's magnetic field. We know that the Earth has a magnetic field all around it, since when we use a magnetic compass, it automatically points in the north direction. Or if you take a freely suspended magnet, then the north pole of the magnet will automatically point towards the north direction. This is in the absence of any other magnet. So it's the Earth's magnetic field that aligns the compass. The shape of the Earth's magnetic field resembles that of an imaginary bar magnet that is buried in the center of the Earth. Do you know what is the polarity of this imaginary bar magnet in the Earth? We know that the north pole of the magnetic compass points towards the geographical north. So what pole of the Earth's magnet is in the geographical north? That's right, it's the south pole, because unlike poles, they attract each other. The south pole of the Earth's magnet, which is in the geographical north, it attracts the north pole of the magnetic compass. Similarly, the north pole of the Earth's magnet is in the geographical south, because it attracts the south pole of the magnetic compass. So remember, the magnetic south pole is near the geographical north, and the magnetic north pole is near the geographical south. So they are opposite. Now one thing to note is that the axis of the Earth's magnet and the geographical axis, they do not coincide with each other. The axis of the Earth's magnetic field is inclined at an angle of about 15 degrees with the geographical axis. So a freely suspended magnet or a magnetic needle makes an angle of about 15 degrees with the geographical axis, and so it points to the approximate north-south direction. How strong is the Earth's magnetic field? Do you know what is the SI unit used to measure magnetic field? That's right, the SI unit is Tesla, and the symbol is T. The magnetic field of a bar magnet is about 0.01 Tesla. And the average value of the Earth's magnetic field on the surface of the Earth is only about 50 microtesla. So the magnetic field near a bar magnet is about 200 times stronger compared to the Earth's magnetic field on the surface of the Earth. So the magnetic field on the surface of the Earth is pretty weak. Now what would happen if magically the Earth's magnetic field became very strong? Imagine all the iron objects being attracted towards the Earth. It reminds me of a scene from the Iron Man movie where all the iron objects get attracted towards him. As we discussed, it seems that the Earth has a bar magnet placed inside it. But actually, there is no real magnet inside the Earth. So how does Earth get its magnetism? It's due to the magnetic effect of electric current. The electric currents are due to the motion of convection currents of molten iron in the Earth's outer core. And the electric currents produce magnetism. So the Earth is like a huge electromagnet. I hope the concept of magnetism is crystal clear to you now.
Alrighty, now we've got to talk about the three-dimensional force vector of magnetism and the universe. So here, as you can see, I've got an hourglass. It's obviously in some sort of tube, some sort of cylinder. But what this is called a hyperboloid. And this is basically the force vector, the three-dimensional geometry of the dielectric, of the ether. And the reason I use the ether as to show basically an example first is because the ether and magnetism are the same thing. They're sort of, he describes them as exact opposites, but they join together to be one. And he likes to call it holos, which is some strange language. The original scripture, that's how they used to call it. Anyway, that's not important. But this is the hyperboloid, and this is the force vector of the dielectric field. And the same for magnetism, but it's the opposite of this shape, which is the torus, which is the toroidal shape, the donut shape. And when you basically invert this, the exact negative image of this is the toroidal shape. And so magnetism and dielectric are the exact opposites of each other, but they join together to be one thing. That's why he says magnetism is the dielectric field. Let's talk about what's happening more in this force vector. So this, the hyperboloid, is the dielectric, and what's happening here is it's centripetal. So the dielectric is centripetal, which is basically means it's going in, and magnetism is the opposite, which is centrifugal, which is going out. I'll show an image that he uses to basically show. He just drew it on a chalkboard, and he's showing basically how the force of motion, the acceleration, inertial acceleration, which is basically the centripetal, which is centripetal, so going in. And the reason it's so good to use something like an hourglass is because, as you can see in the middle, it's like the joining point in the very middle of this where the sand comes out. Obviously this is not how it would be, because this is a literal sand thing and there's like a little tube there to get the sand through the middle, but that's where basically the plane of inertia is. Imagine like a little thing in the very middle of this, and around it there's the plane of inertia, and in there is, like, he calls it the dielectric portal, and it looks like a black hole. So that's why you may have heard black hole. But the reason it's so important to understand this, the geometry and of the magnetic field, of the dielectric field, is because that is basically everything in the universe is because of this thing, and it's a constant thing. He's made lots and lots of videos about this, and this is, I'd say, half of the videos are on this. He talks about it in his lecture, 6-part series. He has plenty of videos, and you may have seen this image. I'll put it up on the screen, and this is a magnet underneath a Ferrous Cell or a supercell. So what this is, it's two super flat glass sheets, and there's like a light to illuminate it all to make sort of like a holographic effect there. And in the middle there's two liquids. There's this thing called mouse milk, and there's also this other ferrofluid. Anyway, it's some sort of liquid which has like iron filings and these other things, and it's this sort of reaction that causes it to illuminate the force vector. And you may have seen lots of images such as this, which is basically the magnet. This is using the original shape magnet, so a disc magnet, which is like the donut shape, a disc magnet under the cell. Place that under, and it's just flipped like this though. So you can actually see each side, the north and south pole side of the magnet, and you can actually identify which one is which. He explains why. I'll show a little clip of that.
See the blue shift over here and the red shift? You see how this looks more bluish green and this looks more reddish over here? I know this is the north pole of the magnet, and I know this is the south pole of the magnet. And right here, between either polarity, you see this bright white line? You see it? That is, of course, the plane of inertia. That is the inverse to polarity.
Anyway, now you can see both sides of it, and in the middle there's this little shiny line in between, and that's the plane of inertia, and in the very middle of that is the dielectric portal. Okay, very difficult stuff here. Now, like I just mentioned there, that there's both sides, the north and south pole. What this is basically each side of it, the north and south pole, and he always mentions that if you cut a magnet in half, a magnet doesn't actually have its own north and south pole. All it is it's just aligning with the field. So if you cut it in half, even if you cut it 1,000,000 times, each would have 1,000,000 north and south poles. Like say you cut it in half, it would be one side's north, one side's south. Anyway, that's just a quick little thing. There's tons of interesting and fun to watch videos on this guy's channel, and he explains it better, but this is a lot of what we've been researching and understanding the geometry of this field, because he reckons it's one of the most important things to know when you're trying to find out basically how everything works. And yeah, it's really cool. He says it looks much cooler in person under the Ferrous Cell. We've got to make it, but most of these things you've got to order on eBay and it wouldn't come in time, but there may be a future video because these things are really easy to make. The only thing, when you put the magnet, since the magnet is so strong, it sort of like leaves a mark if you leave it too long on the glass, so you have to like open it up and re-put the liquid and flatten the sheets. But yeah, he's got videos on how to make it. Anyway, this is a really interesting thing to learn here. It's really cool that we can just show it with this hourglass. Lucky we had them. It's actually a 5-minute thing. But yeah, the very middle of this, that's the point of everything. That is life. And the plane of inertia in the middle, that's where everything has life. So yeah, hopefully you understood a bit about it. I definitely recommend watching his videos if you want to have a deep understanding. He has hundreds of videos on all these topics. Anyway, I reckon that's enough from me.
Alrighty, now we're coming towards the end of the video. It's the last scene for the video. So we're just got to basically conclude, talk about what we've said in the video and summarize everything, and then maybe
simple terms,
and give you some tips, or some videos to watch of his that will make you understand this topic better. Firstly, I just want to start us off by telling you what we've talked about in this video so far. Alright, so first I started sort of summarizing, or what I said was summarizing field theory or magnetism, and I started explaining how it's pretty much it's not like its own thing. It's basically everything. It's what they call the gravitational force, the electrical force. These are all one things. And then I also started talking about how magnetism and counter space is intertwined and how these things work together, and it's pretty much the same thing. So what I just want to say here to summarize for that part of the video is that we've got understanding that magnetism isn't a separate force from gravitational and electrical and all these other forces. It's all one thing, and it's basically it's intertwined with the dielectric or zero point energy, or whatever you want to call it, counter space. These are all one thing. Yeah. I was talking about the current view on magnetism. So this is what everyone thinks, this is what we're basically going against, or what this theory is against. And I started off by saying how like Adrian said, the current theory says that there's a gravitational force, electrical force, magnetic force, and other forces that the Earth contains. And you saw in that video I showed, that was the main part of how I explained the current view on magnetism. He talked about literally everything you needed to know. Obviously he can talk about it more, but in simple terms, we now know the current view of magnetism, which is the Earth has a magnetic field and other fields, and the magnetic field is created by, I think it was molten iron that is charged by electric currents that basically creates an electric field.
And we use the video basically just to summarize how anyone would teach you this theory.
And I also showed you the Richard Feynman video, and he's basically one of the biggest names in magnetism. He died like 30, 40 years ago, but still was the biggest names and was known for knowing the most about magnetism. And he says how the, I don't know if this was in the clip, but because I didn't show the whole video, but in the video he says how the intimate like correlations with the gravitational force and the magnetic force is unknown, so there is a lot of gaps in this theory.
Yeah, because they don't actually know what they're talking about. They just come up with these theories, but they can't actually prove them for certain.
Just one thing I want to mention on the current view is, since we're not the most educated on this topic and we can't point out every single thing that the current view is wrong with and the field theory is correct with, I recommend searching up the magnetism lecture from Theoria Apophasis, that channel with Kenneth Wheeler.
6 separate videos, part 1 to 6.
Specifically, the second lecture, he talks about the current view on magnetism, and he points out a lot of faults in the current theory that he can explain much better than we can. So definitely check that out if you want to think to yourself which theory is the one to go with.
Then I started talking about what magnetism is, and I also started talking about the geometry and the force vector, because he says that magnetism, all it is inertia, acceleration, and force and motion. So inertia, if you didn't know, is the opposite of force and motion. So that's why we were talking about the two different geometries, so the torus and then the hyperboloid, which is the hourglass shape.
Yeah, so they're both inverse shapes of each other.
So the torus is representing magnetism and the hyperboloid is representing inertia, acceleration towards the dielectric. So we started talking about that, and then we're pretty much back to here.
So Kenneth Wheeler, he has hundreds of videos of magnetism, and there's obviously it's a big topic, so there are lots of parts to it. He has a video on basically everything you need to know, and he's always making new videos. It's not like he used to make videos on it. He's still putting out videos, and he has like 6,500 videos on his channel.
And almost half of them on magnetism. I'd say
You
at least 2,000.
You may need to watch a really good amount of his videos before this starts becoming clear to you, because we did, and it's not even fully clear to us.
And it depends what level you're starting at as well.
Yeah.
But yeah.
Alright, so now we're finishing off the video. I just want to say this isn't the most basically conclusive video we've ever made, because we don't have a complete conclusion that's very clear.
We are not educated enough to 100% tell you that this theory is 100% correct. I definitely don't agree with the current theory, because I know how science always gets things wrong, and we're constantly
So what I was going to say,
it's a completely different look at it, and he's saying I sort of am like leaning to believe him, because the way he explains it makes it seem like there's no other possible way. It could be something else, or this could be wrong, because it sort of all works together, and there's no and he could explain everything, because with the other theory there's like so many gaps, like they're always changing, or like changing what they're saying, or not always saying the same thing, so they're always like I'm forgetting the word, but like sort of hypocritical, I guess.
Alright, so to come away from this video one sentence in a conclusion, I'm going to say that the current theory has a lot of gaps.
It's definitely wrong.
And is, in my opinion, wrong.
100% wrong.
This theory could get a lot of things right and could open doors to new studies into magnetism.
So remember, magnetism is force and motion, inertia, acceleration, and is the dielectric field.
Go check out Theoria Apophasis' videos and come back and maybe watch this video and watch his videos and come to a understanding of your own.
Anyway, enough rambling. Thank you for watching, and see you next video.
See you next video.